Sorry. and so he focused on the boycott and boycotting lettuce, isolated lettuce, gallop, etc. Because we really have to get focused on the black neighbors. So that was quite a while ago, but it hasn't stopped. It's it's always, there's always something. So, but just to point out one, those boycotts, they want the farmers were able to unionize and get benefits, protection, and the like. But it took a lot of public physical action out on the streets, as well as talking with legislators and unions and literally supporting an organization that was working towards something. So yeah, that was my first experience in my 20s, not the 20s.
Well, it's the 20s now, so it's okay.
Yeah, it's in the 20s again. Thank you so much. That's awesome that we have some people who really worked on some campaigns. Do you guys want to maybe hop in and talk about what you guys went through down here?
I don't think anybody from our group has policy experience from what I remember, but we're all real interested in it. And we have some good ideas for what we'd like to see happen too.
That's awesome. All right, well, I'll go ahead and let Maggie share her screen and start her presentation. So you guys online, just please be mindful and stay muted, and then we'll get to learn from the master herself, Maggie.
Wow, that is, I hope I can live up to that very kind introduction. Thanks so much, Megan. And the sharing of the screen is going to happen in a couple of parts just to make sure that you can see things. So I'm going to put it in slideshow mode, but I have two screens, so I want to make sure you're not seeing the presenter mode. So bear with me here for just a second. It takes a minute to come up, and then we have to decide if you can actually see it. So hold on. It's a slow jam. Oh, interesting. So what do you guys see? What are you seeing? This is really quite strange on my end of things. I may need to not share the screen. Sometimes this happens. Is this, Megan, can you pull up my slides? I'm not sure it's going to work.
Did you share them with us?
I did. I sent them yesterday, but I can try. Why don't I try sharing the screen again? Hold on. Okay, let's try this again, folks. And I think I'm going to shut out one additional app just to see if that also helps, because things are kind of on a slow boil here.
Oh, I have your presentation.
So you've got the highest. You do? Okay, I was going to say you have the highest tech possible, cute little owl camera, and you know, the technology can sometimes help and sometimes slow things down. But I've got a pretty slow signal. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. I can share a presentation. And then you just let me know.
I'm going to turn off my camera too.
Okay.
See if that helps. Okay, well, it's frozen. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Yeah,
you.
I can hear you, and then I see changing food systems screen.
Oh, you do? That's so interesting. Okay.
This is my share.
Oh, that's your share. I can't see anything right now. My screen is totally locked up. Well, if that's the case, good news. You can see. Let's dive in. And I'm going to see if at some point it will let me, you see my own, I can't see your share. I can't see my PowerPoint. Everything is pausing. So I want to talk a little bit about the role that policy plays in changing food systems. And I'll just start with a few casual observations, just as someone who is an eater and a food systems advocate like all of you. For a long time, I was doing community food systems work. And when I thought about policy, I thought about the Farm Bill. And when I thought about the Farm Bill, I thought about all the things I didn't like about the contemporary American food system and felt frustrated that the Farm Bill.
Okay, Maggie, now you're pausing. Dang it. No matter how hard we try sometimes, you know?
When the door open.
You scared me. Okay, so she must just be paused, so we'll just give it a second and see. So just eat and talk amongst yourself.
The Russians did it.
Oh,
Scary.
Technology's great until it isn't.
yeah, exactly.
Hi, should we try this again?
Okay, we can hear you now.
Sorry, my computer totally crashed, which is never happened. Okay, so here we are. Let's talk changing food systems. So when I first was aware of policy as a tool for changing food systems, what I thought is that all of that was about the Farm Bill. And I was frustrated by the Farm Bill because the vision of the food system that I cared about, I felt wasn't well represented by the decisions that got made in the Farm Bill. And I had no idea really that there were opportunities for state and local policy, and at the local and even regional level, those policies could be made in units of government or they could be made in organizations that actually reached a lot of people. And that had sort of been the framework that I thought about policy for a long time. I would always email my senator about the Farm Bill, usually to complain about the interests that I felt needed to be better represented, which was about the food system at a local and regional scale. And then I was, our city, the city I live in, Minneapolis, established its food council about 12 years ago. And I was invited to serve on the council. I was doing food systems development work. And the mayor said, you have 3.5 months as a group to develop your policy agenda. And this is January, I make the budget in April, which gets decided in May and June, and then the budget year starts July 1. So if any of the requests have money tied to them, you've got to make those requests now. So a group of us got to work and we made 72 distinct policy asks. It was a big, huge spreadsheet. And I found it really interesting. I learned about all these policies and things I didn't know anything about. And the mayor's office and the city council approved all 72. And at this point in time, Minneapolis is looked at as a real beacon for very progressive and inclusive food systems development work. And so that was really the first time I waded in as a community advocate to be a part of identifying policy changes and seeing that policy change as a tool is a really powerful asset for us in our toolkit around food systems change. Okay, Megan, you can pop the slide forward. So let's talk about what policy means in a typical change agenda. You know, we have, I work with communities all over the US and Canada, from Hawaii to Florida and Toronto to Texas, from huge cities of millions and millions of people to remote tribal nations, to, you know, townships and small towns of a couple thousand people. So all scales, a variety of seasons. So, you know, where the growing season is relatively short to places where the growing season is something that occurs year round. And these are generally the kinds of changes that a community has on their change agenda when they're starting to get organized as a group to create positive change in their food system. So, key priority in a lot of places, and I know this is true in Pueblo, is that everyone who lives in the community, regardless of their income, who they are, where they live, all have reliable, easy access to affordable, safe, and healthy food in the places they spend time. So that could be going to a food pantry or a grocery store. That could be when they're at work. That could be if they're a student at school. That could be a young child in a childcare setting. That could be a patient in a hospital. If we think about all the places we spend time in a community, those places are kind of within the radius of our daily lives. This is a priority that a lot of communities care about. And you can see that there's a lot of words in this sentence. It needs to be affordable. It needs to be safe. It needs to be nutritious. And it also needs to be culturally responsive so that it meets the cultural needs, food needs of all the people that live in the community. Another key priority for a lot of communities is they say, you know what, we want more of our local food supply to be raised locally and or raised using sustainable production methods like organic produce, for example. And so people like local, they like sustainable, and they also like local and sustainable. And what people would like to see is more of the food using those production practices in places near where you live. I always call it food, food for here, from here. Is that it also is grown at scale. It's not massive farms, it's small locally owned farms. So it's not just that you want the food to be as fresh as possible or produced with the minimum amount of chemical inputs. You also want that food to support your local farmers, right? So that's a piece of the puzzle in that second statement. The third thing that a lot of communities talk about is we want the assets that we have in our community, like our farmers markets, like our community garden infrastructure, like our hunger relief system. We want those assets to be capable of meeting our needs. So do we have community gardens located in all the right places? Are there enough plots? Do people have easy access to water? Is it near affordable housing communities where there are lots of residents? Can people easily get to the farmer's market by bus or by walking or by bicycle in addition to a car? Is that farmer's market open at a time when most residents are able to use it, or is it twice a week during two different times so people can get to the farmer's market? Does it accept SNAP or EBT, SNAP or WIC? So that's another thing that people talk about is saying, let's make sure that our food assets in our community are where we think they need to be at. Another typical agenda is so many people have some or many of their food needs met through a hunger relief system. And there's a lot of work in many communities to say, let's make sure that system is respectful of all the people who use it, that it's responsive to the unique needs, people who might be homebound, people from different cultural backgrounds, people who speak different languages, and that it is a responsible steward of capturing food waste, to making sure that the food that they distribute is safe. Food skills is another area that communities are really interested in. How is it that we equip people in our community to know how to grow, preserve, and prepare healthy food? So this is a huge agenda in communities. And this goes back to what Brandy was talking about in the beginning in our introduction. She was really talking about people having the skills to be food service workers who can prepare healthy food. And the same thing goes for just regular community residents. Another priority that many communities have is that the food system is fair, just, and equitable. So it centers the idea of food justice. It centers the idea of ensuring that people who are disproportionately impacted by structural inequalities like race, identity and orientation, age, income, that the food system doesn't just serve those folks in an equitable way. The way the food system is shaped and designed is also not only responsive to their priorities, but their visions and ideas. So it's not just the big, powerful players who have all the interests and all the resources, that we all have a say in what that food system looks like too. And then finally, another key priority for many communities is, how do we build a vibrant local food and farm economy? What is it that we can do to support as many thriving local food and farm related businesses as we can? And those can be urban agriculturalists. Those can be, grass-fed beef farmers outside of town. Those can be, small restaurant owners or food truck owners. It can be value like salsa makers or folks who sell at farmers markets, vendors. So these items here are kind of larger categories, but these tend to be really common priorities that you see in a community's typical food systems change agenda. So let's go to the next slide. And then what I'd like to do for those of you who are joining remotely and those of you who are joining in the room, as you reflect on Pueblo or the communities that you're residing in or working with, given this list here, what does your community food systems change agenda look like? I have some idea about what it looks like in Pueblo, but let's just pause and take a look at this list and talk about how similar your change agenda for your community's food system might be, how different it is, if there might be things missing from the list. So what does your change agenda look like as you review this list?
All right, so you guys can kind of talk amongst yourselves and then they'll talk on here. So you guys can talk on here between each other.
Okay.
What are we doing?
So for those of you on the phone, if you want to, I'll start my video because I think my computer is now. What would you say are some of the that you know around the change agenda for your community's food system?
We have
Megan, are you able to mute your end?
Safeway.
She is not. I don't think she's listening, Brandy. I know we have to have the. Let me see if I can.
Agenda
They
right
didn't make me
now.
a host. I was like, I gotta
So
try
it's a
it.
food desert problem out there on the east side.
And they
That's first
have,
and foremost.
I'm
Secondly
gonna
is,
text
I hate
Brandy
when
and
we're
see if they can do it. So is in the absence of, while we wait for
everything that's up
that,
to the case.
can you guys talk a little bit about community's food agenda? Yay. Okay. Can you all hear me?
That's better.
Yes, much
Yes.
better.
So
Yes.
much better.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, thank you. Let's dive in.
I love these examples, and the only thing I can think of right off the bat, because there's a lot to kind of take in right now, but the only thing I can think of right off the bat is just a link to health. And I like what Brandy was saying about, from a prevention standpoint, but also as a treatment standpoint for a lot of the things that are food related that people have issues with.
Great.
So yeah, that's a big part right there. Like we have a new platform called Unite Us, and it's through Kaiser Permanente. And so it's a referral system. So they could refer clients, over to us to get some food, but then we in turn can refer clients over to, let's say they haven't had their annual eye exam or they haven't been to a dentist in, a lot of years. Those sorts of things, as adults, we don't do for ourselves, but we'll do for our children. And so if we want to live a longer, healthier life, we need to be able to have access to those different healthcare partners and, know where to search for them. So I think the more that we're able to get together as a community and even statewide, that's how we're going to make large ripple effects when we're able to work together.
Awesome. Great, Brandy. Thank you. Other thoughts?
I would like to see more community get-togethers. I would like to see the food project reach out into the community, draw people in from the community, whether they be business owners or just consumers or just interested parties. I I think garnering community interest is critical. And I think that we have an opportunity to do that. And how and if and when we choose that opportunity will speak to how successful we are, because I think the one thing that's clear, at least from my vantage point, is that we need more involvement. We need more people. We need more community interest. We need more events that can.
Great.
That's that.
Okay, I think she's, all right. Hey, everyone in the room, can they hear me? I don't think they can hear me.
They can hear you.
Begin to corral everybody.
Hey guys, can you, let's wrap up those conversations and we'll get back with Maggie.
Okay, can everybody hear me? So I'm going to make one comment before we move to the next slide. Megan, if you can help corral your colleagues in the room.
Hey everybody, let's come back.
Thank you. If I was a facilitator, one of the things I'm always gratified by when I'm facilitating meetings is when people are not ready to tear themselves away from their conversations. That's usually a good sign that we really hit the mark with substance. One of the things that Howie raised in our small group was talking about the role of engaging more people. And Howie, if I took your question or the insights that you shared and turned it inside out, so it's sort of taking what you said and just kind of turning it over and looking at it from a different angle, what is the role that a policy agenda related to these types of community changes can play in actually engaging more people in the work? So we'll talk a little bit more about how policy work can serve this engagement function to, expand your reach, deepen the involvement of more players in what's essentially local food democracy. It's democratic practice of local communities centered around food and healthy eating. So let's move on to the next slide. So if we have this typical community food systems change agenda, right? And our small group virtually said, hey, there's a few things I would add to that. It's definitely not a complete list. We had those sort of change goals that people want. Here's what we want our food system to be like. And those priorities tend to fall in 4 domains, where people are saying, we want a more vibrant local food culture. And that is more people are cooking, more people are gardening. We have a lot of locally owned restaurants and food enterprises. We got a smoking hot food culture. It's not just fast food as far as the eye can see, or packaged, processed everything. Our local identity is very much about food. And one of the things that really impressed me in my first visit to Pueblo is I see communities all over the US and you all have such a distinctive food culture. So that's not a foreign concept to you. That's how you roll. And there are always improvements and new things, innovations that people want in their own community. But I also work in some communities where the only food culture they have is fast food restaurants. That's really all they have. So food culture is one part. Food skills that we already talked about, where people say we want kind of as a general practice in our community for people to have healthy food know-how, right? Like the individuals know how to eat and prepare healthy food. And then in the places we spend time, those food environments, we can get healthy food where we are, right? So no matter where we are in the community, healthy food is the easy, affordable choice. And then finally, what's the state of our food infrastructure? How are we getting food to people? Is it coming from local farms, being processed, cleaned, aggregated, and delivered? What does our infrastructure need to look like? Or what changes do we need to make to that infrastructure in order to fulfill the vision on the previous slide of the kinds of things we'd like to see in our community? So these are sort of the domains of change. And then Megan, you can skip ahead 2 slides to the examples. Okay, yep. So these are some examples of changes at different scales, right? And this is where, when we're thinking about policy and systems change, why it's distinct from other change strategies that are a part of healthy eating. So oftentimes people talk about the role that education and awareness can play in changing people's behaviors and habits around food. Oops. Can you go back to slide 6?
Sorry.
No problem. Slide 6. Yes, there we go. So people, and oftentimes when they're talking about individuals, it usually is around food skills, and they'll say, we not only want people to be knowledgeable at how to grow, prepare, and preserve food, we want people to make healthy food choices and know what healthy food choices are, but we also want people to understand the food system. So we want them to be literate about their community's food system, about our nation's food system, about where their food comes from. And so there are a lot of different examples at the individual level that many community food advocates, when they're working together, talk about. And so you can see the three items on the left are really a strategy, a change strategy that's designed to change the hearts and minds and skill sets of individual people. Policy change, it tends to focus more on changes to systems. And so in this case, it's a little, you're the lever or the tools that you use rather than just education and awareness is something like a policy change. So if you're trying to ensure that healthy food is affordable and easy to get in the places we spend time, that's a job for policy. If you're trying to find some ways for the community as an entire community to support local farmers and ensure that healthy local food is widely available, policy is a tool, a lever that you can pull to help make that happen. If you want to have the assets and infrastructure you need to support a vibrant local food system, policy is one of the tools in your toolkit for help making that happen. And then finally, is there a way to ensure at the community scale that our food system is just and good for the environment? That's something that takes a lot of people and systems coming together to actualize. It's not just the work of a bunch of distinctive individuals that are working toward that. Policy is another example there of a lever or a tool you can use to achieve those outcomes. So it's also important to think when you're building a policy agenda, which changes are you trying to accomplish that are about education, awareness, and targeting individuals, whether you're trying to involve them or you're trying to help them develop better habits, and which things are about systems fixes that lead to the kind of changes you want. And so it might be that you want people to have better access to healthy food so that they can use their healthy food skills. So it could be that you have a dual strategy where part of it is about food skills education, which is targeting the individual and using education as the lever in your toolkit to make those changes. At the same time that you're working on community food policy around issues like food deserts, which is something that one of you brought up earlier. So thinking about the distinction between changes that target the individual and changes that target systems, and that policy is extremely helpful when you're trying to make changes at a systems level. Okay, next slide. So here's like notes from the field. What is it that we know about all this policy change stuff, this systems change stuff? Here's what we do know. We know that communities across the US, just like Pueblo, really are trying and hoping to change the food environments and the practices that go along with it in the places that people spend time. And I've talked about some of these settings already, and Brandy gave a really good example in our small group where she said, I would love to see not only our schools start serving more healthy food that's grown locally, but to have the staff who work for the school food service have the skills and know-how they need to prepare those healthy meals that are tasty and the kids will like. So you can create these systems changes, and there's some skill sets that go along with it, but many communities are saying, we got to deal with our food environments. We've got to create healthier food environments where kids spend time, whether they're in school or out of school or at daycare. We want to do right by your seniors. We want to do right by parents, households with young kids. We need to change our food environments for the better. Another thing that communities are, we know that communities are working on is they want to see the people who live in their community make healthier choices, but also have those choices be easier to make. So access is easy to those affordable, healthy options. I remember when my kids were young, I would have to drive to 4 different stores every Sunday to get everything I needed to prepare food in the way that I thought was healthiest for my family, because I lived in a food desert. I was working full time, and there weren't very healthy options in the part of the city that I lived in. And so I would have to drive 20 minutes to get to the nearest grocery store and then hit 4 different stores to be able to get some of the things that I needed to feed my family. Many communities like Pueblo want more robust, accessible community food assets. All the things you're doing on supply chain development, like building bridges between local farmers and your hunger relief system, about thinking about whether or not you might like to have a food hub, all of these conversations and the work you're doing often in Pueblo is in service to a more robust, accessible set of community food assets. The other thing we know is to make these kind of changes, pushing forward with a policy and systems change agenda at the local level is a really powerful way to be able to make these changes. And we know by using policy to redesign these environments is one of the most powerful ways to change those individual behaviors. So when the unhealthy choice becomes the difficult, expensive choice, and the healthy choice becomes the easy, affordable choice, and you've been thoughtful about the nudges that you set up and the places people spend time, those healthy choices are bound to follow. So it really is about prompts and people's environment. So when we're thinking about even what we care about in terms of people's individual behavior, policy can be a really powerful companion to that, because you can make those changes to environments through the use of policy, which is supportive of people making healthier choices and having the opportunity to have healthy behaviors instead of I work the night shift and the only thing available is the vending machine where, I can get a large energy drink and a candy bar, and those are really my only options because it's the middle of the night and I'm at work. Okay, next slide. So one of the questions that a lot of communities are asking is, hey, when we really boil down to it, some of this is about people's food behaviors. So what is it that we can do to change people's behaviors? And then the other question they ask, next slide, is what's the process? So if we recognize that we want to change policy and we recognize that what we're trying to change systems, how does it work to effectively do that? It's not even what we want to change, it's how do you get those changes to happen, right? What are the skills and strategies needed in order to create those changes to systems, to create supportive environments for people to make healthier choices? Okay. So here are the two questions on the same slide. So typically many food coalitions like the Pueblo Food Project pose these questions like, what are the things we need to do to help people move toward healthier eating behaviors, right? And then the second question they're saying is, we know we want to make all these changes to our food system. How do we influence those changes? What is it we need to do? And typically the answer for the first question is more education and awareness. And the answer to the second question is advocacy. That's what you do. You advocate for change in an organized way to change systems, and you reach one and teach one to help change people's behavior. So this is a pretty typical response as communities are thinking through how to approach their change agenda. Okay, next slide. And then what we know from the evidence base, like all the research, is that the formula for change, to change people's individual behavior, is to focus on a change agenda for the systems and environments they're spending time in. So the policy agenda can go a long way in laying the foundation for layering on the other things that people talk about with respect to individual behavior change, like education and awareness. For example, do you have to convince 10,000 people that they should choose broccoli over a Slim Jim? Or do you shape the environments where they're spending time so broccoli is the easily available choice and Slim Jims are not? And so the idea here is that you can structure the environment in ways that provide really rapid shortcuts across way more people at the same time to motivate and prompt those healthy choices. So that's one of the other powerful pieces about systems change, is it really can be a compelling companion to the work you're hoping to accomplish with the individuals in your community, so that wherever they turn, the environments are structured to support their healthy choice making. Okay. So let's talk about why communities focus on systems change. And this is sort of a hierarchy. So if we start at the bottom with the $10 words, social determinants, what we see in our society, and I think all of you can relate to this in one way or another, is think about challenges and barriers that you yourself or people you love encounter. And those are what we call social determinants, which are essentially social and economic conditions that are baked in at the social level that are really challenging to fundamentally shift at a local level. And so we think about something like the federal minimum wage. There's definitely things in my hometown where they raise the minimum wage. They had to do it over 5 years. So there are things you can do as a local response. But there is structural inequality at our societal level that really keeps a lot of folks in poverty. And so those social determinants, it could be that you live in a remote rural community. It could be that you're LGBTQ. It could be you're an elderly person on a limited income who doesn't have access to a vehicle. It could be that you live in a tribal nation and you have poor access to high-speed broadband internet. There's all kinds of social and economic conditions that are baked into the fabric of the society that are really challenging to fundamentally shift at a local level. So oftentimes at a local level, what we're doing is responding to the impacts of those conditions as part of our policy agenda. So oftentimes what we do instead is it's like, those are a given, what can we do about that, or what can we do in spite of that? And that's where a lot of the local work happens, is changing the context. So how is it that we can change systems at a local or regional scale to improve conditions and to achieve the goals that we want? So the policy and systems change work really happens in this middle tier, which is at a local or regional level. This is where we have sway and influence. This is where we really can make some powerful changes that lead to measurable impacts for the better in our community around food, health, and agriculture. And then finally, education's at the top, right, where this is really the focus on the individual. So education and awareness really focuses on teaching the individual new skills and knowledge, and doesn't in and of itself change systems or environments. However, if you layer on education on top of a focused systems change agenda where you're trying to change the circumstances or the context, that can be a really powerful formula to couple these two together. Okay, next slide. So let's have a conversation now. You've heard a lot about individual level changes and systems changes. You've heard about how these policy and systems changes in communities oftentimes focus on changing context or changing environments. And you've heard about the role that education can play in individual behavior change. But as you look at the work of the Pueblo Food Project, in what ways do you see it working on individual and systems changes? And let's spend about 5 minutes in pairs talking about this, except for the folks online. We'll go in the main room, and then Megan, if you can help us with the sound so we can hear each other, that would be great. So you can see the discussion question at the top of the slide. Thank you.
What's that last word up there? How's the Pueblo Food Project?
Work, I think.
Working, yeah. How's the Pueblo Food Project working?
Working. Okay, I think you guys should be getting here. Sorry, I'm yelling at you right now. All right, you guys can go ahead and talk, and then I'll come back in a couple minutes. Maggie, if you want to write it in the chat again, that would be great.
Great, and it's 2:15. Okay, here we are. So I'd love to hear, for those of you who are involved in the Pueblo Food Project, how do you see it working on individual changes and systems changes? So those changes that really focus on individuals and those that are focused on changing systems.
Well, I like to say kind of almost a continuation of where I was before, is that I think it's critically important we draw in community, whether the community is commercially oriented, nonprofit oriented, or consumer oriented. We draw people into events, to happenings that obviously focus on food and education, and help build a groundswell of interest from people who want to get involved with the food project. And I kind of see that lacking right now. I mean, I don't see a tremendous groundswell of people flooding in to participate. And of course there are a lot of variables, right? We've got COVID, we're in the middle of winter, but come spring, summer, fall, I'd like to see a ramping up of that. So to me, that means creating events that will draw in local consumers, a food festival, something specific. And that's what I'd like to focus on, is actionable events that we can create to achieve what it is we want to achieve. So that's my 2 cents.
Right on. And I think, Howie, in response to that, Lake County was asking the same question. And they were saying, okay, we have the drivers, the coalition members, we have the activators who might be participating in some of our work groups. We want broader reach and broader engagement. And so there's this third tier of stakeholders called engagers. And what Lake County is doing is formulating an approach to policy as the tool for engaging more people. So they're actually using the development and execution of a policy agenda as a way to build a broader food movement for their community. So it's a really nice.
Can you give an example? Can you give an example of that? It's a kind of general and vague to me.
Yeah, sure. So, for example, say you decide that you want the school district to put more language in their wellness policy about farm to school procurement. And you reach out to parents groups, you reach out to, childcare providers, after school programs, etc. There's a whole group of people who may not consistently come to Pueblo Food Project meetings, but are like, right on, I definitely want better food at my kid's school. I'll show up at a school board meeting for that. I'll join the Facebook group to follow that. I'm happy to, write a letter to the superintendent of support for this. And so what happens when you add a policy component like this to a coalition's, sort of portfolio of food work is you start to engage more people, but you engage more people in a variety of ways. So some of them may show up and be like you, and some of them may show up and say, I'm here for this specific policy, and these are the ways I'm going to show up and be involved. So it's a really nice way to be an attractor, to draw in a broader base of people who ultimately may also become involved the way some of the more active coalition members are.
So it sounds like we need to market or promote our policy. So people who jive with that policy will say, gee, I really want to do that. And I want to participate in some way. But if they don't know what our policy is, then we're not attracting them.
Yeah, and I think you're on the front end of sorting that out, right? So what is that policy portfolio, and then how do we build the movement around that policy? How are we mobilizing people, and then how through that mobilization are people also learning about and be connected to the Pueblo Food Project? Let's take one more comment here from somebody else, because I know Megan's going to come back in a hot second here and rope us back in. Anybody else want to talk about individual and systems changes that are underway with the Pueblo Food Project?
I would like to say within the Pueblo Food Project and individuals themselves, if they broaden their reach, like for example, myself, we run a food pantry, we do mobile food distribution, but outside of that, as long as I'm reaching out to different places and doing my part as somebody a part of this Pueblo society, I think we're able to touch more lives in every different way, and sharing that information. In the Empowerment Center, we do host teaching classes, culinary classes. We do provide other organizations the opportunity to come in and share.
Oh, Brandy, I think we lost you. Darn it. Jenny, can you hear Brandy?
I cannot, no.
Okay. Okay, well, I just...
Oh, no, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I was just saying that if each individual is able to reach out, even outside of their organization, to be able to share the good work that we are doing. For example, I'm a parent, I'm trying to help out with my kids' school, make sure that they have options to healthy food access, sharing the culinary classes, recipes, and different educational opportunities through the Empowerment Center, and just reaching out to help volunteer with other organizations or offer any help and assistance. I think if we're all able to reach out in different directions, I think that's another way of getting things moving.
Thanks, Brandy. Great. Good. Well, it's exciting. It's kind of a new direction. And in a minute here, I'll talk with the group about kind of movement afoot in Colorado and around the US, the way that coalitions are coming together to really take on policy is an important part of their portfolio. And then just building their policymaking chops, which, Jenny, is what you said. I'm here I'm here to learn more about how to do that. And oftentimes it's a partnership with public health playing a really instrumental role, which is exciting. I feel like they forgot about us.
I don't think they can do much without you, Maggie, so.
That's funny.
Are you working with other groups? I heard maybe.
Yeah, I work with 12 communities across Colorado.
Okay.
Through the Colorado Health Foundation, and then I work all over the U.S. and Canada, and on lots of different food systems things, including a lot of local and regional food policy work.
Oh, good. Well, it'll be nice to hear if there's any similarities or, lessons learned from other Colorado communities in particular for this work.
Absolutely, and there's good stuff happening. I mean, you guys just had a really good event last week in Pueblo around local and regional policy, so the timing's really good. I'm just going to mute myself and give Monique a quick call. Hold. No luck. I think they forgot about us. I'm going through my slide deck now and deciding which slides not to use.
So Maggie, what do you mean by a movement?
Well, you need, if you're talking about a base of advocates to initiate a change, that requires organizing, community organizing, right? To build a base of folks who are aligned to move forward together on a change agenda that they'd like to see for their community. And that's what the Pueblo Food Project is it's convened a lot of interested players who are working to advance a shared agenda around food systems change. And the same is true for a policy agenda as well. How is it that you build a base of advocates to demonstrate to the community that you're interested in supporting those policy efforts together? Megan, can you hear me?
Hey, Derek, can you hear us?
No, I don't think they can. I think she put the mic off, but I don't know. That's okay. So Howie, that's what I meant by movement building, right? Is building the base of the base of advocates that you need in order to successfully get that policy change across the finish line in a strategic way.
It's interesting because the whole term policy change connotes serious, in-depth strategy, having an agenda, congregating with interested parties who are willing to work for that agenda. And, part of what is beautiful to me about this is that we can do this as a grassroots effort too.
100%.
If we just threw a party and called, hey, Pueblo Food Project, we're having a food party and we're going to have music and we're going to have food, we're going to have classes. I think that would draw a lot of people.
Sure.
And sometimes I think
that's about the tactics, right? So what are the tactics to draw in your advocates and attract them? Yeah, and that's part of the organizing strategy, is saying these special events are a way that we're going to pull people in and see if they're interested. And every community comes up with their own advocacy strategy as a way to attract and mobilize their
Right. Well, a couple of weeks ago, we were calling restaurants, offering out how we could assist them. And I felt, well, cold calling restaurants is not highly effective. I think that what we really need to do is draw people. We need to draw people to us rather than go out and try to sell people on who we are and what we have to offer. So, in terms of strategy, there's a lot of dynamics, and that's been part of my frustration, to be honest, is that I don't really understand some of the things we're doing, how we're doing it. And strategy building is important, but there's a point in time where you kind of get caught up in your underwear. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I think these movements evolve, right? And you get to a different
Yes.
developmental point, and then you're saying, okay, what's ahead for us, and how do we need to shift gears to, acknowledge and prepare for being at this different kind of inflection point in our work.
Well, I think we're still looking to draw support. I mean, I go to meeting after meeting and we have 3 people, 6 people, 8, 9, 10 people. And many of those people are from nonprofits or organizations. They're there almost as a function of their business, which is fine, but we need interested parties who want to put forward certain dynamics. So I don't know, it's just been a bit frustrating for me.
Well, hopefully this effort and this focus will help. You'll find some alignment between that and a focused way forward. I've been texting Monique, who says she's on another call, so I don't know what else I can do. I don't know how to get them to pay attention to us. I don't know where they went. Kind of feels like the staff aren't in there, doesn't it? As you look at the room.
Maggie, I'm actually right down the street and I'm gonna go check on them right now.
Okay, that's so nice. Because we only have 5 minutes left.
It looks like they're doing an activity or something, or debriefing. I don't know, something.
I don't know.
So I'm going to bug out, Maggie. Thank you for joining us. Thank you
Nice
for
to
your
see you,
input.
Howie. Well, hopefully we'll see
Wish
you
you all
next
the
week.
best. Yeah, okay. So we'll be seeing you.
Thanks,
Have a good
take
one.
care.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. So Jenny, how long have you lived in the area?
Pablo, I've been here about coming up on 10 years. I moved from Minneapolis, actually.
You did? Where'd you
Yeah,
go?
I was in grad school and then stayed a few extra years. So I was there for about 5 years and
At the
then
U of
moved
M?
here. Mhm.
Yay, I think, are we here?
I
It's
think it
just
just
that
changed
side.
because
Oh,
Howie's
she's not sharing the
screen.
screen.
Megan.
Megan?
Okay, can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we only have 4 minutes left, so we've been waiting to try to, I'm gonna try to wrap things up because I have another engagement. So
Okay, sorry.
it's okay.
Okay. Hey guys, let's reconvene really quickly. We've gotta hurry up. I've got another thing.
Yeah, I got another thing too.
Find out what all the rules are. Yeah. And then this one's like about object history. Both of these are. I got more for you. All right, Maggie, go ahead.
So Megan, can you start with slide 14 and then we're gonna jump ahead. Hey, everybody. It's always nice to see how engaged folks were in conversation. I know we're supposed to wrap in a few minutes, so I'm gonna skip ahead some of the content and we can cover that when I see you next week. So if you can share slide number 14, Megan. The that's why slide with the carrots.
There we go.
Great. So I just want to share, the reason local and regional policy in the food arena has really gained momentum over the course of the last 20 years, but especially in the last 5 to 7 years. So now we're seeing hundreds of food policy councils across the US, or food councils and coalitions like Pueblo Food Project that are advancing policy as part of the overall portfolio of their work. You've got a whole bunch of those councils in Colorado who use local policy to affect systems and environmental changes. So they're busy doing that stuff right now all over the place in Colorado. And in fact, in Colorado, you also have the benefit of additional organized networks that are working on state level policy that's informed by all of these different councils and coalitions around the state of Colorado that work collaboratively on regional issues and share information and best practices. So people are getting organized within and across scales around food policy in Colorado. It's pretty exciting to see. And then what I would do is, Megan, if you can skip ahead to 21, slide 21. So that all sounds great. Keep going. One more. Okay, here we go. Whoop, back. There we go. So when we're talking about what does policy make possible, so you kind of had an idea of the sort of general aims that a community has, and you have this idea that there's individual change and systems change. But these are examples of concrete changes to local food systems that happen as a result of policy. This goes to that question around food deserts. Can you open grocery stores or markets that are accessible to people? In the case of the first bullet, it's a central gathering place in the middle of downtown that also helps local farmers. What about food access options in small towns to help revitalize small town main streets? What about incubator kitchens and food hubs to aggregate, prepare, and market local foods? And the related business incubators that might be needed for that to be successful. How do you make it easier and safer for people to walk or ride their bike to a farmer's market or a local restaurant? And what about things like school gardens? What can you put in school district policy that enable people, kids, to learn how to grow their own food and make healthy food accessible to local families by, for example, increasing enrollment in federal and state level food benefits programs? So you can see here, these are examples of very tangible, concrete, meaningful changes that policy can affect in a local context for your community's food system. And then let's go to the next slide. So now I'm going to talk to you just quickly about when I see you in Pueblo next Monday, what we're up to. So let's go down to slide 23, the final slide. So today we talked about what is policy change, when do you use it, what's it for, what can happen. And what we're going to do next Monday when I'm with you for the day is focus on growing your policy know-how and your policy change chops. So we'll not only be covering a little bit more about what's involved in making policy at the local level, it will also be having a clear understanding of what those possibilities are. So what are the types of policies you might be interested in advancing? And how do you organize an effective advocacy campaign to achieve your goals? And so we'll cover 4 basic questions. Given our community food systems change agenda in Pueblo, how can policies help us achieve our goals, right? You do a lot of work. Policy is one way to do that. What's involved in identifying, advocating for, achieving, implementing, and sustaining policy wins? So you can win that policy, get it passed, but that's not the finish line. The finish line is actually ensuring that it gets implemented and that you're able to sustain it, right? So winning is important, but the implementation and compliance is really important too. So what specific aspects of Pueblo's local food system are you trying to change? And given that, what particular policies could be helpful in successfully making those changes? Policy change isn't a be-all, end-all, but it is an important BFF in your efforts to change your community's food system. So are there specific policies given your change agenda that would help move you down the road toward what you're trying to achieve? And then finally, my mom and dad are school teachers, and my background's in adult learning, and no one loves a good case study better than an adult learner. So we'll also talk about examples of local policy efforts, so it's not totally abstract, but we'll say, here's a case study that this community did. You're interested in this issue. Here's 5 or 6 examples of how communities develop policy to respond to that. And then we'll also talk about the so what. So if people are able to get those policies passed, what are the changes that actually happen as a result of it? So we'll have a conversation about impacts too. So next Monday is going to be very much structured toward tools and skills development and coming out with concrete plans. Today was sort of a conceptual overview, but next week we're going to roll up our sleeves and really provide more granular skill sets around the kinds of things that are helpful to understand in order to effectively identify and execute a change agenda that's focused on policy. So thank you so much all for coming, and I'm really looking forward to seeing all of you. I think it's maybe the 2nd or 3rd time since the work from home got implemented 3 years ago, and each time it's been Pueblo, where I've had the opportunity to come and be with people. So that just makes me feel really good. I always look forward to coming to Pueblo. It's one of my favorite new places, one of the real gifts of having the opportunity to begin to work in Colorado. Pueblo was where I came first, and it's just such a unique and dynamic place. So I am looking forward to it. So we'll see you all on the 7th. If you have questions or things you'd like to cover next Monday, let Megan and Monique know, and they'll convey that to me, and I'll be sure to design our time together to make sure that we have an opportunity to explore some of the things that matter to you. So I will catch you on the flip side, people. Nice to see you all.
Bye, Maggie.
Thank you.
Bye. See you next week.
Thank you, Maggie.
Is there anything that we need to read or go over?
No, there won't be anything like that.